it's you and me. Almost. Well, it is. And Srila Prabhupada's here too. And maybe Arjunacharya. And here comes Segi. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai, Prabhupada Jai, Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnavad Parnamahang Saparvrajak Charis His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories to the Samo devotees. All glories to the Samo devotees. All glories to the Samo devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, Sati quits her body, Text 3. Tato Vinishvasya Sati Vihaya Tam Shokena Rojena Cha Duyata Hrida Pitror Agat Straina Vimudha Dear Grihan Premnatmano Yo Ardam Adat Satam Priya Tatovinishvasya Sati Vihayatam Shokena Rojena Chaduyatarida Pitrora Gatstraina Vimuda Dear Grihan Premnatmano Yordam Adatsatam Priya Tatovinishvasya Sati Vihayatam Shokena Rojena Chaduyatarida Pitrora Gatstraina Vimuda Dear Grihan Premnatmano Yoradamadatsatam Priya Tatovanishvasya Sati Vihayatam Shokena Rojena Chaduyatarida Pitroragat Straina Vimuda Dirgrihan Premnatmano Yordamadatsatam Priya Tata then Vanishvasya breathing very heavily Sati Sati Vihaya leaving Tam him Lord Shiva Shokena by bereavement Roshena by anger Cha and Duyata afflicted Hrida with the heart Pitro of her father Agat she went Straina by her womanly nature Vimudha deluded De intelligence Grihan to the house Premna due to affection Atmana of his body Ya who Ardham half Adat gave Satam to the saintly Priya dear. Translation. Thereafter Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. In other words, a husband without a wife or a wife without a husband is incomplete. Vedic marital relationship existed between Lord Shiva and Sati, but sometimes, due to weakness, a woman becomes very much attracted by the members of her father's house. And this happened to Sati. In this verse, it is specifically mentioned that she wanted to leave such a great husband as Shiva because of her womanly weakness. In other words, womanly weakness exists even in the relationship between husband and wife. Generally, separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. The best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. That makes family life very peaceful. Sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, as found even in such an elevated family relationship as that of Sati and Lord Shiva. But a wife should not leave her husband's protection because of such a misunderstanding. If she does so, it is to be understood to be due to her womanly weakness. Tato vinish vasya sati vihayatam shokena roshena chaduyatarita Petroragat straina vimuda dirgiham premanatmano yoradamadatsatam priya. Thereafter, Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Nama Om Vishnupada Krishna Presta Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasachachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmanachananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyas Chakripas Sindhubhyevacha Paditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes, well, sometimes Srila Prabhupada in his purports and sometimes just the Bhagavatam in and of itself, they focus on a particular grouping or type of person and really sort of zero in in a detailed way and make analyses of that particular type of position in life and what's wrong with it, at least in material terms, what may be good about it also. And for whoever happens to be within that group, be it men, be it ladies, be it married men, be it married ladies, because you get all of these focusing on married men with Kashyapa and Diti, that story, the situation of married men is focused on. It's over quite a number of verses. It's very interesting. Of sannyasis sometimes, like in the story of Gajendra, and there are other places also where the sannyasa order of life is focused on and different aspects of it, but most particularly, at least in the story of Gajendra, some of the pitfalls, you could say, which may be there, can be there, if one is trying to be a sannyasi and trying to live as a sannyasi, but is being challenged in that effort. And if, just men in general. I was just reading yesterday, actually, an analysis of Srila Prabhupada's emphasis of how a man must not remain alone with his mother, his sister, his daughter. And there were, as I recall, 2 references to particular places in Srimad Bhagavatam where this subject was really examined in quite intense terms. And of course, from the conditioned point of view at least, there may be the tendency to think, if your group is focused on, to think, well, that's not me, I'm not like that. But you never know. Yeah, things can happen in this material world. This material world is such a difficult place, and so many challenges of so many types can be there or are there and can just be encountered in very sort of specific and clear ways. And of course, Shastra and Srila Prabhupada, they're trying to help us how to deal with so many different types of situations. I was also reading yesterday reference to this whole pastime, and I forget exactly who it was, but someone was talking about how it's bringing out the danger of envy, which of course we acknowledged on a few occasions, and it's very true. The danger of envy is great. It can be spiritually fatal. It can be materially fatal too, actually. So when one's group is focused on and in somewhat cutting types of terms, best to just hear it and understand that this is to help me, and it's not just to belittle me or something like that, just to criticize. So certainly, in this material world, whatever type of material body one has, there is a huge number of shortcomings. They may not all be present, really manifest, sort of operationally manifest at every moment, but certainly from time to time, the tendency is for those types of shortcomings and that type of nature to manifest. And as much as possible, one should be ready for that and educated about that. So when such a happening comes to be, then one can be prepared at least to some degree, or as much as possible. So here, of course, the particular point is straina vimudha di. Straina vimudha di. Straina is connected with the term stri, which is, one of the classic Sanskrit terms for women. Straina, by her womanly nature. Vimudha, deluded, and intelligence. So her intelligence, we know the background, how the story has developed right to this point. And it's clear, should be very clear to all of us, that because of her womanly nature, her intelligence has become severely deluded. We can note that the term for deluded here is vimudha, not just mudha. It's bad enough being a mudha, but when you're a vimudha, then you've got a really serious problem, because V is a Sanskrit prefix indicating very, not just an ordinary, in this case, mudha, or foolish person or deluded person who's just not understanding, but someone who's really not understanding. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 9, aparitranaya sadhinam vinashaya chaduskritam Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So in principle, it's the same type of point of a very strong emphasis. Vinashaya chaduskritam. Lord Krishna comes, paritranaya sadhunam, to deliver the sadhus, the devotees, and vinashaya chaduskritam, to destroy, to kill, to destroy the demons. But of course, the term used there is not just nash. Nash means to destroy, but you could say ordinary destroy, which of course is bad enough. Something gets destroyed. But when something gets very destroyed, just like annihilated, pulverized, volatilized, or something, it's really, it's extreme destruction, totally pulverized. Yes, and the description, there's a description we've mentioned before in the case of Arishtasura. In the case of Arishtasura, that Krishna killed him, but then Krishna was so angry he doesn't appreciate demons. It's not just a pastime, but he actually expresses his feelings about demons. He really, really, really doesn't appreciate them. So he started kicking the dead body of Arishtasura until the dead body of Arishtasura was unrecognizable as, what is this? It's just like a big lump of, the term used is something like jelly, something like that. So that's vinash as opposed to regular nash. Really heavy destruction compared to some, if you can use the term, ordinary type of destruction. So yes, sati strina vimudha di, that because of her feminine nature, womanly nature, her intelligence became severely deluded. And of course, as we all know very well by now, and we've mentioned it every day for weeks more or less, the end result is death. She dies completely unnecessarily and is just extremely unfortunate. But that's what happens. And it's all because of this, strina vimudha di. Yes. So in the purport, as we've read, Srila Prabhupada discusses, like, you could say, the regular type of situation in a married relationship, that it's a relationship of sharing, and of sharing not just one's possessions, although it includes possessions, but including yourself and your actual physical body, your actual intelligence, your consciousness. All these things are shared. And therefore, as Prabhupada says, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. And therefore, a husband without a wife, or a wife without a husband, they're incomplete. They're incomplete. And therefore the situation, of course, when things are really substantially incomplete, then the whole situation is basically a failure. So particularly in this case, Sati, she has the extreme good fortune of having Lord Shiva as her husband. He is not just your ordinary husband. Of course, he's not exactly on the level of Lord Krishna, so it's not exactly the same as having Lord Krishna as one's husband, which was the case, of course, with the queens in Dwaraka. But still, it's not so far from that type of situation. He is, after all, a type of expansion of the Supreme Lord. He is a form of Lord Vishnu, but Lord Vishnu who has become exposed to the influence of the material nature and affected by his closeness to the material nature, and therefore his position is compromised to some degree, and that being compromised sometimes shows itself in that sometimes Lord Shiva does some things which are, you could say, regrettable, and he regrets himself after. Like in The 9th canto of the Bhagavatam is the story of Lord Shiva with Vrikasura. Vrikasura. Probably everyone knows that story. You know that story? Right. Yes, and Lord Shiva got into great danger due to shortcomings in terms of intelligence. He just didn't use his intelligence sufficiently, and he got caught in a very dangerous and potentially fatal situation. And ultimately, the Supreme Personality of Godhead had to advent himself in order to save the life of Lord Shiva. Fortunately, Vrikasura was, well, you could say, Vimudha. Actually, Vrikasura was a real super Vimudha. And when Lord Krishna challenged him that Lord Shiva's given you this benediction that whoever's head you touch, the head will just fall to pieces, and therefore you want to kill him, you want to touch his head, but don't you know this Lord Shiva, he's like this, he's like that, and how can you take him seriously? Therefore, what you should do, you should try it out on yourself. Touch your own head. And of course, because Lord Shiva is just not to be taken so seriously, of course it won't work. And then you know he's a rascal, and then you kill him. It's kind of the whole, everything's very confused. I mean, the Lord is not confused, but what he's saying is like it appears confused. And because Vrikasura was a genuine Vimudha, then he accepted that, yeah, I should touch my own head, and because Lord Shiva, he doesn't have such power, it won't work, then I'll know he's a rascal and I'll kill him. But of course, Lord Shiva does have that qualification, and when Vrikasura touched his own head, his head did explode or collapse or whatever, and that was the end of him for that lifetime. And Lord Shiva's life was saved, and Lord Krishna at the end confronted him and gave him a bit of a talking to, that don't you give these types of benedictions again. Similarly with Lord Brahma in relation to Hiranyakashipu. So this tendency to be mudha or even sometimes vimudha, this is an extremely dangerous tendency which every conditioned soul has. And yes, how many times have any one of us, each one of us here, done something which at the time we thought, yes, I should do that. But then afterwards we have seen some bad result comes, and we think, why did I do that? Did any of you? Never happened? Happened? It's happened. How many times has it happened? And this is the vimudha tendency, unfortunately. So here Srila Prabhupada is characterizing ladies strongly in certain negative types of ways, you could say. And certainly one can imagine some ladies or many ladies saying, I'm not like that. Yeah. So, but sometimes it happens. And therefore, as a general rule, according to Vedic culture, as a general rule, the wife is advised, you could say advised, or you could say instructed, to follow the lead of the husband. Now, of course, not every husband is like Lord Shiva. Really? In Kali Yuga. I mean, we've got, at least in material life, and sometimes even in devotional life, but definitely in material life, you get plenty of husbands who are just not up to the standard. And in many of those cases, the wife is actually more intelligent and capable and qualified, in fact. And there's an exchange of letters between Srila Prabhupada and one lady, in which Srila Prabhupada the lady is making some complaints. My husband is like this and like that sometimes, and I can see it's wrong. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that yes, sometimes the wife has to take the role of the leader in the family, including spiritually. These things happen sometimes. But generally as a rule, if the husband is at least reasonably properly situated, I mean, of course, he may have his moments also from time to time, but as a general rule, it's a good idea for the wife to follow the lead of the husband and to avoid that situation which we hear about. You know, I haven't been through household life, at least officially in this lifetime, but some experiences there and some observations are there that sometimes, because the husband, he has his moments where he's not doing as well as might be hoped. And what happens is that the wife, the woman, develops the habit of challenging practically any time, every time, or at least often challenging. And sometimes she'll be right, but sometimes not necessarily. And this, of course, is called henpecking. Henpecking. And, you know, if you've observed hens when they peck, well, if you've observed hens, you see they really peck a lot. In fact, the whole day, it's practically what they do. They're looking for something to eat, so they peck, and then they peck, and they peck. And this is kind of the life of a hen to quite some extent. So when the wife, of course, if the husband is just unqualified, which unfortunately is there in many cases, particularly amongst the non-devotees, it's a sad situation. But otherwise, at least if the husband is reasonably well situated most of the time, best for the wife to follow his lead. And Prabhupada says here, the best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. That makes family life very peaceful. Sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, as found even in such an elevated family relationship as that of Sati and Lord Shiva. But a wife should not leave her husband's protection because of such a misunderstanding. If she does so, it is understood to be due to her womanly weakness. Yes. And as in this case, to become attracted by something. But that something she's attracted to may not really be worthwhile, as in this case, that Sati has become overly attracted to her father's family. And unfortunately, the father, anyway, we all know the story well enough by now, the father, Daksha, is just really unqualified. So until he, or if it happens, that he actually comes to his senses and becomes properly situated, he should be avoided, even though he is the father. Unfortunately, this happens sometimes. Yes, so these are some lessons which are very important for married ladies to learn, and they're also very important for married men to learn. They're very important from the other perspective. Hare Krishna. Any comments, questions, words of wisdom from the experienced gentleman? Just 8 seconds. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Srila Prabhupada mentions in that purport Sati's weakness. She had a weakness.
Right.
And I was thinking about Prabhupada's personal life, how with his wife, and she had a fetish for eating biscuits and drinking tea, which he tolerated, and then in the end it was just the last straw was when she sold his books, yes, just for tea and biscuits. And,
right.
And I think a lot of these realizations about women.
Well, that's true, yes, yeah. Bitter experience, years of experience, culminating in this, just too much. And I was reading yesterday that Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, he, in his purport to this verse, he says, Sati was in Maya. So, there you go. It's just in Maya, in illusion. Anyway, thank you for that observation. Any other observations?
Earlier on you mentioned about a man should not be alone with his mother or sister.
Right.
I was thinking of King Pandu when he was cursed. After he shot the deer, and they cursed him that he will die in the embrace of his wife. Then later, I think he may have forgotten that curse, and he was deep in the forest. He was overcome by desire, and then he forgot that curse, and he ultimately paid the price for.
Thank you.
Very well.
Swarup Damodar Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.